Hi there, my name is Procrastinating Writer, otherwise known as James Edwards, and welcome to The Lone Smoke, a random idea I had in order to avoid making a video and instead just talk. Now, today's topic that I'm actually going to talk about is how to write a bestseller, but really it's more to the point is reverse engineering a bestseller to a state where we can then say how to write it. It's a very huge, massive topic, but I'm just want to give you a brief overview of what every other video is going to tell you. Every other video and every other article you can read that's going to tell you is pretty much not going to say this. Now, I know that because, well, for starters, a lot of people are going to be marketers who try to sell their own business, so of course they give you some free feel-good piece of advice about social media and about positive image spins and book covers, and everyone's trying to sell you their service, and so every service that they have is the answer or is a key component to it. So then you got your writers who will then say the best thing to do is to write a fantastic book and a fantastic thing, and you think to yourself, oh, it sounds easy, I just need characters and conflict and drama, a good book cover, a good sales description, I need to get these people on there to throw this book out, and that's how everything's going to happen. It's all these ingredients together, all this money I'm going to throw away. And that answer is a very vague one, because all the components really work independently from one another. There's no unified idea behind it, no unified idealization behind it. Now, if you feel that I am already sounding pretentious as hell, then feel free to get off this video. But this was an air of things that I don't say in video when I have to worry about framing, when I have to worry about running time, and the fact that you are just staring at my face talking. Perhaps it's a little bit better just to have a voice. Just have a voice talking in the background whilst you do something else. Perhaps you just don't like the way I look, or the fact that you hate that my bedroom is pretty plain and boring. And with writing, there's not a lot of visual media I can use to express a point. I can use clips from shows and TV shows. I can use diagrams to show your character arcs. But if you really can't understand that tension and drama has a starting point, rises, and then has a denouement and is resolved, if you need a graph to visualize that, then perhaps I don't know. I honestly, I've seen these things and you don't question it. You go, yeah, that makes sense. But it's kind of like a diagram showing you to look left and right before you cross the road. Someone can tell you that and you understand it just as good as a video explaining how to look left and right. Surely there are things that we naturally can think of on ourselves. And a lot of answers that people come up with are answers we've already come up with. Already very superficial things. And I haven't got anything to sell you. It's not called The Lone Smoke for nothing. I haven't got a service to sell you. I'm not selling you my marketing skills. I'm not selling you my salesmanship skills. I'm not selling you book cover designer. What I'm coming from is as someone who is not going to lie to you. I think an individual sort of point of view across that is not looking at how everyone else is doing it to ascertain things, and that might make me sound sort of big-headed, but this is my sort of style, and I find writers and individuals, we have our own unique styles, and we shouldn't really constrict ourselves with what everyone else says. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about bestsellers and the greater scheme of things, then please continue on. If you want someone to go, well, here's 4 steps to write a bestseller, and knock it off in 4 minutes worth of video to tell you to like and subscribe and share it, then feel free to choose that. Which one's going to be more beneficial to you? We don't really know. It's down to you. So without further ado, and almost 5 minutes in, let's actually get down to the topic at hand. Now, let's start with humanity, shall we? We're all writers. We've all observed people. We all people watch. We all like drama. We all like conflict. So naturally, that's what we gravitate towards. We love history and alternative futures and the why questions, abstract thinking and imagination. Now, there are several traits of humanity that no other animal has, or at least to the varying degree of complexity that we have it. Apes, primates, they have social circle and they have sex and they play games and they eat food. We do that as well. We do it to a huge extent, but here's a little bit of evolution history for you. Once we learned how to cook food, cooking food means it's easier to chew. We spend less time chewing, whereas primates, for example, spend 8 hours a day chewing food. We only spend an hour and yet consume high calorific foods, because once we did that, we had more energy, we could develop bigger brains, we could develop more power hungry brains, and so our systems became complicated. We play more than any other animal in the entire existence of the world. There might be an alien species that is constantly playing Call of Duty. I don't know, but what I know is that this is the case right now on Earth, that we take more time than any other animal to play. Now, play and imagination have a very important part in our evolution, because we could practice situations safely. We could play, fight, and learn how to coordinate our hands and fists, and we have entertainment and have fiction to explore things and to feel emotions and deal with those emotions before we have to deal with it in real life, such as love, for example. Loads of stories that revolve around finding love and the trials and tribulations, and in one way we sort of use it as some kind of counterbalance towards our own experience, and we look towards these things for some kind of affirmation or some kind of ideal or steps to take in order to continue on with our lives, in order to what to do with love, and so with that comes expectation. We play a lot, we have a lot more time because we are not eating as much, and food has become a very social event. We use it to lubricate social wheels. We invite people over, we celebrate birthdays with cake, with loads, bounty of food and feasts. We have restaurants for dates. We don't eat for survival, we eat for enjoyment and social lubrication. Our play, you can see on YouTube, on Twitch, you can see on Tumblr, you can see with games, that even with the most isolated and lonely playing experience, that it branches off into social interaction. Everything comes back to how we are around each other and how we talk to one another. The biggest technological advancement has been not the ease in which we now have access to the internet, but the ease in which we use the internet socially, talking to one another. The greatest leaps have been from Facebook in way of changing our culture and how we act, in Twitter and how we talk and share news, and the internet becoming what it is, and YouTube and sharing, content creating and viewing it at the same time becomes such a huge social experience that now the dynamics of us have changed ever so greatly from 50 years ago. Now, even with those things, people still say technologies are a bit intrusive and we'd rather go outside and everything like that, but not escaping that fact. We can't escape that fact that where we are right now is massive in terms of how easy it is for us to connect with people. Now, every time someone talks about a bestseller or anything popular, it's not because of its merit. Now, the thing with the open free market that the Western countries have, that our culture has, is that you will see things become hugely popular and make huge amounts of money, even when they have no merit to themselves. Take, for example, 50 Shades of Grey as literature. It was nothing beautiful or artistic. However, it became a huge conversation. It became a source material for a conversation that we had had for a very long time, which was on romantic idealization in fiction and these fantasies of these men, be it vampire, be it billionaire, the very strong, protective, ever supportive lover who is just every woman's supposed fantasy, or the fantasy that people bought into. And it created a whole discussion on, well, it didn't create a whole discussion, it added to a discussion, brought it to a new point, where we were talking about what this said on women, what this said on men, what this says about misogyny or sexism, what does this say about our culture as a whole in terms of what we celebrate. And I think a large portion of the popularity, or at least the widespread exposure that 50 Shades of Grey got, was down to that fundamental question of, is this healthy for us? Is this damaging to us? Why is it that we celebrate mediocrity now? Why is it that fundamental craftsmanship, expertise, and masterclass is no longer something that we seem to cherish or seem to prove to be profitable, because profit and money is the overruling factor towards success when you deal with materialism, when you deal with consumerism, when you deal with a capitalist society, when things run on money. You can't escape the idea that more money, if something earns far more money, then it is far more important than something that earns less amount of money. And so we look at a free open market. We are not looking at a million people or millions of people or tens of millions of people saying this is what's important. It's this is what we're talking about. Everything comes back down to social interaction. Everything comes down to how we then talk about things. It's no great leap of logic to deduce that all the times, all huge films that came out, anything huge like that, is being a topic of conversation. It has become a word in and of itself, like Inception, like Hans Zimmer, like The Dark Knight. It becomes something which we then use as language, which we then adopt as social interaction. Look at fandoms, for example, like Sherlock fandom on Tumblr, or any other fandom, where you have GIFs, or GIFs, whatever you call them, animated stills, frames, repeated frames from something with some kind of meme on it, either taking a very dramatic scene and saying, this is what I feel like Mondays, and Sherlock's there just screaming, ah! Or something on those lines. Everything becomes a language, and what people say about how to write a bestseller largely avoids the very fundamental truth of life in 2015, the life in 2016, the life we're going to have in 2017, because everything revolves around social interaction. Everything revolves around language and how we communicate to one another. Now, what is a popular thing and what becomes a bestseller is down to social commodity. It is down to something being worth talking about. Now, what do we actually now talk about? What do we see? What we see now when we look at the world through the internet, through the eyes of our Facebook and through YouTube, is a rather strange two-dimensional space where reality of a culture, our perception of culture, is not inherently true, where we can still believe that things like 50 Shades of Grey sell really well, where we can still believe that The Only Way is Essex or Geordie Shore is the most important thing, or that everything is about Big Brother or these reality shows, but that might not be in step with line, but we hold on to these prejudices. We hold on to this belief and we tout things, and if we look at culture, I mean, there comes a critical mass, there comes a point where there's enough people in a population in order to create a culture, in order to create beliefs and moral guides, as you see in any group, that web pages, all the millions of web pages on there, if you have enough people on there, enough forums, enough websites, they produce their own culture. The way people talk and act and the values and beliefs change from website to website based on the amount of people there and the established rules that those people create. So if you were to look at the internet as it actually is, it is millions of pages of culture, millions of pages of individual culture that exist, that is ever dynamic and ever changing. So reality is now something it has never once been. Reality now is a million other realities all existing at once. There is beliefs and values that are around that aren't true for other pages, and so we can't escape the fact that language and community, culture, and our forces as human beings have no effect. We can't escape that fact. And so when people talk about bestsellers, they forget that social interaction and the social laws and everything that we have as human beings is inherently a part of this. People think it is down to the most exciting sales pitch that you can make, but if you are trying to meet a critical mass of people, which then spirals and tumbles down into huge amount of sales and huge topics, you have to realize that it's not based on individuals acting as individuals in a large group. It is individuals acting in a large group and acting in a large group. If that makes sense, let me just sort of say this. what people tend to say in terms of marketing or selling a book is that you need two people to read it and then talk about it, and they'll tell two friends, and then those friends tell two other friends, and it's exponential. And that's the sort of thing that people are lulled into, and it sounds easy. But at some point, those people who started just talking about the book started their friends talking about their book and about their contrast between their experience of it and their previous friends' experience of it, whether they like it or dislike it or have a different belief about a topic or dilemma that came up. At one point, the conversation stops becoming about this story and becomes about its greater pull and effect on larger conversations around it. There is absolutely no denying the fact that after every mass shooting, every tragic event involving a gun, that America starts speaking up about gun control. A conversation that is not just being created because of that, it's being ignited because of that. And we can't deny that one of the things that helped 50 Shades of Grey be so popular was the ongoing conversation we had on easement, I guess, of the romantic fantasies and literature that we were peddling before, where we then looked at it and just went, as united, as a whole, in this camp anyway, going, oh my god, how is this something? Not realizing that because we were talking about it, either about hate or we were liking it, that we were still spreading the message across. That's how media works now. Even though everything seems to work intuitively to how we want it to be, and we all seem to be saying, don't show these graphic images on things, let's not show this, let's not talk about that, let's not show these faces, and yet things happen anyway. There seems to be culture and media, especially news stations, and the way people act, which goes against how everyone else wants them to act, and yet that never changes anything. Perhaps it's because whether or not you have a positive message or a negative message, you are still getting the message across for someone to take a positive or negative effect out of it. If I was to say 50 Shades of Grey is awful, down a long enough timeline, someone's going to come on that video or that article and defend it and say it's good. And so in my message, in my product, if you will, of my opinion, my emotion, it instigates someone else's emotion and opinion, which it gets attached to that. Unless I disable comments on this video, someone can then tell me that I'm a complete idiot. If I'm going to go, I'm the smartest man in the world, and someone says, no, you're not, then it doesn't matter what I've said because someone else's opinion has been attached to it. And that's the way conversation tends to lead. It is not exponential in the case, it diffuses out from its original roots, and everything goes back into the prejudices and biases that we've always been talking about. Which is why you see that people, like in the wake of the tragic events of the shooting of the cameraman and reporter, that eventually everything came down to gun control. It comes down to that, and there's not much mourning in the way of the victims. There's not much what we would do for the family and friends. It all became about the media's portrayal of it. It all became a different conversation that we were already having, and every bestseller diffuses to that in some way. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that when you are trying to make a book a bestseller, it comes down to its effect on a conversation that is already either taking place or is taking place. Nothing ever dies. You can't write to a particular trend or a particular conversation going on nowadays. However, you can write to any conversation, to any trend that once happened, and then eventually down the line it will become a current trend again because we will start talking about it again. We have spoken for millennia about war, about philosophy, about where we come from, about human nature. We have spoken on length between justification of war. We have spoken on length on equality in society and social justice and social injustice. We will forever speak about these things because they will not go away. It is our fundamental human nature to ask why. Now, why is a very encompassing, very abstract question that only we ask ourselves because it answers the what, the how, the who, and the when. Why is it that good people do horrible things? We then point to a good person that then does something horrible, and this is the how. These are the steps that happened in their life to bring them down this path. This is the thinking that occurred. This is the psychology. This is the drama behind this character, and this is when it happened, and these are all when these particular things took place. And it takes away the individual, the how, the when, and the what. Well, the how, the what, and the when, and then it encompasses it in the why, and we as humans are why creatures. So to answer these questions about what makes a bestseller or what makes something hugely popular, you can't ask the what and the when and the how. You have to ask the why. That's how you discover the truth really behind these things. The truth never changes in regards to how we react to one another. Let's take, for example, things that happen around in other mediums. Let's say games. Now, a popular example I always go back to is Flappy Birds, because I think a lot of people remember Flappy Birds. It was a novelty. It was a knockoff. It was a terrible, crappy, frustrating game, but it was novel. And people mentioned that the ad revenue around this free game earned the developer £50,000 a day. The ad revenue alone earned £50,000 a day for novelty. This was what we were saying we wanted. It was not based on merit, it was not based on skill, it was not based on art or uniqueness, it was based on mediocrity and novelty. And we all hated it, but at the same time passed the message along. And ultimately what we see with the open market, with what becomes a bestseller, is not down to craftsmanship and skill, it is down to what we take from it. And so whatever you end up writing, I hazard a guess that if you had 1 million people read your book, it is polished and edited, so there was no spelling mistakes and no grammar mistakes to skew the results, that a lot of those people will actually enjoy it. A lot of people will actually like that. When you take it to the individual level, a lot of people will actually like things that they would otherwise not have been exposed to or would have chosen themselves. And that is something we find on the individual level, that even though we like comfort, we want something refreshing. Even though we hate a slew of crap films, the cliche generic films that come out, those are what are popular because they're comforting, and we are scared of spending our money on something horrible. But we can't escape the fact that yes, maybe it is not down to just writing a good book. It's not just writing a good story, but rather writing a story or selling a story, packaging a story in a way that we can get other people to talk about it and talk about large things, because everything comes down to social commodity. This is why news stories and gossips become such high value and high traffic, because if you know a secret about one of your friends, maybe your friend did something, you want to tell your other friends, that is a huge juicy tidbit of gossip. That is social leverage. That is bringing someone news, bringing someone joy, entertainment for a bit. It is a power, because you have power over someone's emotions and someone's opinions, which is why Ashley Madison, a website for affairs and cheating, has gotten so much press coverage, more so than it ever did when it first bloody came out, I may add, which is odd, to be honest. And surprisingly, even though it's been hacked, even though the content and details have been displayed, still a huge surge of people are signing up to this website because they now know of this website, despite the fact they've been told and it's been shown in the news to have been hacked, and everyone's outrage of it. It doesn't change a damn thing. But this news is important because it hits on very important things that we hold, which is monogamy, which is faithfulness, which is the sanctity of love, more so than anything else. And we don't like cheaters. We hate them. We don't talk about the individual act itself. We don't take into account why or who. We probably don't even ask ourselves if some of these people on there are doing it because the other half is what we would consider a horrible other half. We just don't like it, and we talk about cheating. It becomes a thing, and we use our own emotions, our own opinions, and headlines. We are a generation, and quickly becoming a nation, of people who can only read headlines, to the point where if you go on an article on Facebook or a video on Facebook that says some kind of sensationalist headline, a lot of people are going to be acting based on that headline. They're not going to read further into the article. And what you find is that you don't click on something on the promise of more information, you click on affirmation of the headline. And so what I find with people is that it's all social commodity. It is all social interaction. And so what makes a bestseller is how you swing it into a bigger conversation, and people taking it as a language, as a word in of itself. So that sounds very abstract. That sounds very difficult. But that means anything you are writing now, you can turn into a bestseller. You can give wide range exposure to, if you know how to get people to converse, if you know how to get people to talk. And that comes down to not only your choices in the book itself and your style, but the people that you market it towards, people you send it out to. But it comes down to knowing how people are going to use your book, how people are going to use your words, and that they're not going to ultimately be talking about the story itself, but they're going to be talking about the drama and the themes and the bigger conversation that's taking place. Where, let's say, you were to write a story about someone who has a affair, and someone who has an affair on a woman who, by all accounts, loves him and is perfect and is undeserving of it, and instead going into the psyche of that character who has that affair as to why, as to the how, and as to perhaps bring about the topic of what masculinity means, or our confusion towards love, that we think it is this whole butterflies warm feeling 24/7, whereas that's just the infatuation state. Maybe there's a confusion between what we feel, what we think, and maybe live in a society that doesn't tell us anything helpful at all, but will punish us nonetheless. Or maybe we can do something and explore concepts that society and our culture gives us. And maybe just understanding that that's the route in which our characters live with, to that be the sales blip, to that be the discussion of the story. You're not selling the product, because if you want to sell the product, then by all means go the product selling route, the same way you do a jumper. But a jumper or an item of clothing or a gadget becomes a bestseller when you involve it within everyone else, when you involve social language with it. And that sounds really stupid, I know. But like the iPod, for example, the iPod became a huge, massive thing. It became an icon, it became a symbol, it became a legend. The same way a lot of other shoes do, clothing do, other gadgets do, must-have things do. It becomes something else that we then use to say something about ourselves, or to say about a view of something. So instead of selling it like a product, like, oh, this is a story about Bill who cheated on his girlfriend, and guilt and his self-exploration, and just something like that, and that drama, it is to sell it and talk about the actual drama itself, the actual real-world conversation that takes place, and find out where your story sits in that conversation. And so when people talk about it, they talk about this conversation, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because what will have people gravitate towards your book, the same way what gravitates people towards games. The thing is, yes, the individual features sound great, but we live in a world where people can then talk about the book, or talk about this film, talk about this game, and we can watch people play games, to extent we listen to people reading books, that it is what someone else is doing with it that makes us want to play it, or makes us want to watch it, is the effect that it has on other people that makes us want it, more so than anything else. So yeah, I think what makes a bestseller is how you twist it to be socially valuable as a conversation piece. Ideally, yes. I mean, that's more of a vague, probably perhaps more vague and more pretentious, fucking stupid way of saying how to make a book, because you can just sell a lot and have it be a bestseller on the basis of selling loads of copies, and you can do that with something that has. But, well, can you have a bestseller that does not contribute to any conversation that we are having at the moment as a society? I guess that's the question that I want to leave you with. Because that's the question, really, is it possible to make a bestseller that people don't talk about? No, it's really not. When people don't talk about anything, it doesn't exist. It's a free market, and in the free market, what reigns supreme is opinions, is emotions, is a large conversation, people beating their chests on the internet. And so I want you to remember that it's not basis on the words that you use per se. It's not really on what kind of story it is you're telling. It's how good you are showing and getting people to see the underlining themes of your story. It's how you get people to talk about those, And that's where marketing really sort of comes in with this. So when you have someone selling their services, are they really in your best interest? It's all up to you. I'm not saying anyone's good or bad at the job, and I'm not saying they're out to scam you. I'm saying there's a lot of people who can throw stuff on social media and who tout that social media is important. And if you get someone with 500 people to see it, then maybe 300 or 200 people will then tweet, and then those 200 people have followers who then tweet exponential. But if it is not part of a larger conversation that people have, it will become a mute. It will become something that no longer exists. And so, with that in mind, that's how I think you should write a best-selling book. Now, if you've made it this far in the Lone Smoke, then thank you very much. This has been quite a rant with not many pause of breaths in, but I've not been holding my breath for half an hour, so I'm sorry if you hear any pops and anything that doesn't sound nice. This is a new sort of format for me. In my next podcast, which I don't know yet which we're going to be, I'm going to be talking about what makes a great writer, the progress towards being a great writer, and what I feel is not arbitrary, because I will get into this a bit more, but it's not really about the level of words you use. It's not how complicated you can make a story. It's not down to complicated plotting. It's not down to adjectives, really, but more a state of mind and a being with your words and the space between them. That's all I want to say. But if you enjoyed this, then please subscribe and like. Give me your feedback down below, and please stay tuned for the next one, where you're going to have very much the same pretentious pretentious man throwing words at you, hoping to God they make sense. But I've been James Edwards, otherwise known as Procrastinating Writer. So you lot have a fantastic day, and I'm going to go get some writing done. I hope you do as well. Goodbye.